Hello and welcome to episode 38 of the Ego Chall Podcast, a Call of Duty esports podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we will be discussing the first major of the 2022 Call of Duty League season, which took place this past weekend. And we will be jumping right back into predictions and giving our thoughts on the first set of qualifying matches for the second major of the season, which starts, the qualifying matches start this week. So no rest for the wicked, as they say. So we're going to get right back into it. Before we do any of that, though, how are you doing, Bink?
I'm doing well. Really incredible weekend of Call of Duty. A lot of awesome matches, and looking forward to recapping it for you guys here.
Yeah, this was the first major of the season, like I said, but this was also the first LAN since Champs, which was in August. So it's been a long time coming. This was in Arlington, Texas, which conveniently worked out for OpTic Texas, who was hosting the LAN. They were the team that came out as the champions of this major. They defeated our pick, and the team that we've essentially picked every time for about a year, Atlanta FaZe. They defeated FaZe not once but twice during this tournament. They defeated them in the winners bracket before beating them again in the grand finals. But we'll get to that a little bit later. We're going to run through these matches as they happened during the tournament. It started on Thursday, March 3rd. So we started in the winners bracket with Los Angeles Guerrillas and the London Royal Ravens. You went with LAG. I went with London. That's not a usual pick for me, but I ended up being right on this one. London, they end up winning 3-2 and send the Guerrillas down to the losers bracket. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on a lot of these like round one or round two matches because I mean, there are quite a few matches to get through, and we have to predict the upcoming qualifying matches. But any thoughts on this London versus LAG match?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there was a ton of matches this weekend, and this was the first match on Thursday. It feels like forever ago, and I really honestly don't even remember it too well off the top of my head. But I just remember coming into this event that I was going with LAG because they had played in the online qualifier matches, and London's only loss was to LAG, and I believe LAG took like both hard points in that one. So that was kind of my train of thought, but that's not how it worked out in this scenario. It did go to a game five, but London took both hard points and then the game five search to win 3-2. If we just look at the stats real quick, Nasty Nasty and Hook both dropped 91 kills, the most in the series, but Nasty had the best KD at a 1.15.
Yeah, so LAG, they get sent down to the losers bracket with that loss. London, they moved on to round two of the winners bracket. In another winners bracket round one match, we had Atlanta FaZe versus the Boston Breach. Unsurprisingly, we both picked Atlanta, and Atlanta came out with a 3-0 sweep over the Breach. Yeah, not too much of a surprise here. Again, this was also on Thursday, so this was just the start of more than a dozen matches this weekend and a lot of maps. Do you have any? Do you first remember this match, and do you have any thoughts on Atlanta beating Boston?
I just remember, at the time on Thursday, they come out 3-0 stomp Boston, which was what a lot of people were probably expecting. But the big highlight in particular for this series was just Sim's performance after. I don't want to say struggles because he necessarily wasn't struggling, but he was not performing to that MVP caliber level that he has been known to produce so consistently since coming into the league. So however you want to categorize that, he picked it up and started this tournament with a bang. He went 96 and 55 against Boston for a 1.75 KD in the series, and that's 96 kills in only 3 maps, by the way, with one being a search. So pretty impressive. I do remember I wrote down here he dropped 46 in the map one, which, yep, it was Bokage, so that makes sense. And then he had a 1v2 in the search where he shot Method's body, which was always exciting for the shooting bodies crowd like myself. And then, yeah, they just, rode the momentum and took care of business 3-0. And at this point, I was like, in my head, I just, was thinking, damn it, if this is what we're getting out of Simp for the entire tournament, this is scary for the rest of the teams. But we'll get into that later.
Yeah. Toronto, they beat the Los Angeles Thieves 3-2 to send the Thieves to the losers bracket. You picked Toronto. I picked LAT. This was a really close match. Bance, he did your favorite move and really everybody's favorite move. He pulled off a Ninja Diffuse. I mean, this was really close, and this was a match that I was looking forward to in particular because I was interested because Toronto had kind of not fallen off, but they hadn't performed as well as we expected them to coming into this major, and the Thieves had looked really, really good coming in. So it was a really interesting matchup, but Toronto, they end up sending the Thieves down to the losers bracket. Do you have any thoughts on this match?
Yeah, I think this was the best match of the opening round for the winners bracket. Super entertaining. It also had some. It set the stage for some. I don't really know, storylines or like key data points, I guess you could say, that we'll talk about as this tournament progresses. But just as of note for this series in particular, the Thieves won both hard points. Toronto won the control in both searches. You will understand as we go through the tournament why I'm saying this, but it's just, it's worth pointing out now. The other thing, like you said, there is the Bance Ninja in the game 5, but there was also, I believe it was on Desert Siege. Yeah, it was on Desert Siege, and Insight had like that one round where he hit a couple nice snipes too. So yeah, there's a lot of cool moments in this series. It was a match I remember we were predicting could go either way, and it was one where I thought would go down to a game 5, and that's why I leaned towards Toronto. But yeah, and Envoy ends up dropping 115 kills in this series for the loss, which ties his previous mark for the most he dropped. And earlier during the online qualifiers, it was the most dropped in a one of the online matches so far in Vanguard until Hydra eclipsed it by 1, and it was eventually eclipsed in this tournament, which we'll also talk about later.
The final winners bracket round 1 match was OpTic Texas, the host team, versus the Seattle Surge. Kind of similar to the Thieves Ultra match. Seattle had looked really good in the early part of the season and in the preseason, and OpTic, of course, lost their first 2 matches of the season and seemed to pick it up since then. They come in, OpTic does, and they beat Seattle 3-0, which was not your pick. You actually went with the Surge. You had a lot of faith in them. And but OpTic, they end up winning this. They sweep Seattle. The first map had to be technically replayed because it crashed mid-map. But OpTic, they win on Bokage, and then they win Search and Control. So do you have any thoughts on OpTic? I mean, it's not an upset, obviously, but it is. It was a emphatic win for OpTic, especially considering how good Seattle looked at one point in the season.
Yeah, that's the big takeaway for me here. Is this was a convincing victory for OpTic. Obviously, sets them up for success and the rest of the tournament. It makes sense considering how well they played throughout the tournament. But at this point, this was like a huge. I don't know how I want to word it, but it was just like. It was kind of cementing the fact that something's going on with the Surge, and it's just, it wasn't like that same team that we saw to kick off the online qualifier matches. And I made the argument in the last episode that, past iterations of the OpTic teams in, previous years have come out slow to start tournaments, although this roster was obviously different, has different players, including 2 players from that had never played on OpTic before this year. So that didn't really, make sense. It was just something I brought up, and they certainly did not come out slow here and just absolutely took care of business right away.
Yeah, and as we'll talk about in just a little bit, You could make the case that this was both Seattle underperforming and OpTic overperforming, especially at the time. People, I mean, I don't think people really underestimate OpTic to that degree. I don't think that it's what I'm trying to say is it's not impossible for them to beat Seattle, and I think most people would say it was the most likely outcome,
Mhm.
or that it was at least 50-50. But the Surge, as you know, as we can see in this tournament, just didn't play well, and they haven't been playing well for like the last week or two before, like online and everything. So I don't really know, what's going on with them, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. But let's get to these loser bracket matches. So we had 4 losers bracket matches on Friday. So we actually had a few more. Actually, I think we might have 5. But the first of which was Minnesota, the Rocker, in their first match of the major versus the Los Angeles Guerrillas, who we talked about. They were beaten by London the previous day. I picked LAG. I thought maybe they would bounce back. They were pretty close to beating London, who are a good team. But LAG, they get swept by Minnesota and are out of the major without a single victory, which is very on par with the LAG that we've come to know and love over the past 2 seasons. So a 3-0 for Minnesota. They move on, and the Gorillas are knocked out. We'll continue to talk about Minnesota, but Bink, I want to hear about LAG and your thoughts on their performances in the major.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is most likely a case of, they had that hard fought initial series against London, and maybe they just, I don't know if tilted is the right word, but they just didn't regain from that loss and, you know, weren't able to take down Minnesota. I believe these two teams did play in the online qualifier matches, and I believe Minnesota won in game 5. I don't have the online qualifier results up, so I can't check, but I'm pretty sure that was the case. So regardless, it could be a matchup thing. Um, Not really sure. I just know, looking at the stats for this series in particular, Slasher notably struggled, went 32 and 54. Um, he did like comment on it, I believe. Yeah, so he tweeted quite possibly the worst series I ever had. Sucks our practice was so good the past week. GG's Minnesota. And that was interesting too. I didn't even bring that up, but they were talking on the broadcast before their London match. The desk was saying that like LAG was looking really good in scrims leading up to this tournament. So obviously practice was going well, but it didn't translate to uh this land tournament. So I don't know. I don't think it's, super cause for concern. Obviously, it's not ideal for these players to, that this team that many people were expecting to be like a top half team coming into the season, and they performed, decent in the online qualifier matches. It just didn't translate here. So I don't think this one placement is like a giant red flag or anything. I don't expect like any immediate changes for them. We're just gonna have to see how they respond in the upcoming online qualifiers before Major 2, and they don't have a lot of time to do that. So we'll see what happens.
To just confirm, Minnesota did beat LAG in week 3 of the online
Yeah.
matches, 3-2. LAG won the first hard point and the control, and then Berlin Search, Bokage Search, and Berlin hard point all went to Rocker. So definitely a change from their previous series. I'm not really sure where LAG go from here. I mean, I don't I don't like saying roster changes, but I don't think that this team has looked particularly good so far, and I don't know what the ceiling is. If this was 2017, I would say that this roster has the potential to be like a world championship roster, but it's 2022. A lot of things have changed in that time, and I don't really know if this foursome can actually be be at the top of the CDL. And I mean, that kind of sucks to say because I really like Slasher, and a lot of these guys are really talented. And I think the world of Asim. I think that he's like a really good glue player, but at the same time, obviously something's not clicking where you lose both of your matches, and this is land, so there aren't any online excuses anymore. So I don't really know. It seems very disappointing for a team like LIG to go out without a win at a major.
But that is, a silver lining, at least in my eyes, is that if we had heard before the event started that they were like doing really bad in practice, and then they came out and got like smoked at the major, then maybe I would say like, it's time to think about making a change. Or they have Spart signed to the bench, I believe, so maybe, they could potentially look at a change with him. But because like people were apparently saying they were doing so well in practice leading up to the major, I still have hope that this team could turn things around. They're a super talented squad, like you said, a lot of slaying potential, and also like you, I think very highly of ASIM. So I think we're just gonna have to see if they can turn things around here this week.
Next match of the day was the New York Subliners in their only major match against the Los Angeles Thieves, who were knocked into the losers bracket after a loss against the Toronto Ultra. LAT, they win this 3-0. Hydra does everything he can, especially in the hard point. He drops 40 kills, goes 40 and 27. He's the only player on the Subliners that was positive with a 1.48 KD, but it's just not enough. This was a 250 to 230 win for the Thieves, and then the Thieves also went on to win that search and the control. So the Subliners, they are the most disappointing team of the season so far, from a team that has two of the best players of all time, and Hydra is one of the most promising young players. And at the beginning of the season, there was Neptune, who I think still has a lot of potential. I don't think we can really take too much from just a handful of online matches, to be honest. But now with Royalty in this lineup, they haven't really shown any improvement. They've won one online match, and in their only match at the major, which is not a huge sample size, I'll admit, they didn't come away with any map victories. I believe that they still haven't won a hard point, if I'm not mistaken. No, they've won maybe like one or two hard points this season. I'll go to a breaking point to fact check that, but either way, they've won a handful of one of the most important, game modes. Search is probably technically the most important, but there are two hard points in a series typically, so they haven't really done well. What do you think of the Subliners, especially with Royalty in the lineup? And just give me your thoughts on that.
I think this was a case, obviously, like you said, the Subliners have been disappointing and they haven't looked good. Um, I think this was just a really tough draw for them. I think
Yeah.
the Thieves showed throughout this weekend that they're a top team in the league, and they were coming fresh off a loss to Toronto, super close loss. So they were probably heated about that and just wanted to, come out, set the tone early, and take care of business here. So I think it was a tough matchup. Obviously, starting in the losers bracket, only had that one life. Didn't get to really see much from New York. I think they just need um, this new stage. I keep wanting to say stage because that's what they called it last year.
Yeah.
But this new set of qualifier matches coming up later this week. It's basically they got to look at it as like a fresh start, like starting the season 0-0 from there, and see what they can do if they are able to rebound, fix anything in the short term. Um, I don't know. We're just gonna have to see what we get out of them, I guess. I'm still I don't want to say hopeful, but like you mentioned, they have two of the most prolific players in Call of Duty history on their team, and they have a budding star in Hydra there. It's just gonna come down to how they're able to form a system around these guys of what they want to do, and go from there. But at this point, if they continue to struggle early on, I wouldn't be surprised if we see further roster changes. It just comes down to what the change would be, because I feel like If they continue to struggle, replacing Royalty wouldn't necessarily be the answer, even though like he hasn't, been dropping a 1.5 or anything since he came in. I don't think necessarily he would be the problem. I think it might be a situation where New York has to take a hard, long look at Clay and Krim and see if the duo is working. And obviously, if they continue to struggle, something is not working, and they might have to make a change that some organizations have regretted in the past with moving on from Clay and or moving on from Krim. So that's obviously, that comes with a whole bunch of different other situations or circumstances, because they're obviously presumably paid very well, and um, it would be tough to just like bench those guys and not have them competing in the league. But at the same time, it might be tough to find another team that would be willing to buy them out, or pick up their salary, or even have a spot for one of those guys. I don't know off the top of my head what could happen there. So that's all just speculation. I don't expect this to be something that happens right away. But if New York continues to struggle, I think they're not going to be complacent. I think they're going to try to change something to turn things around.
Yeah, I do think Royalty is the odd man out just by the process of elimination. I don't think that Krim or Clay will be the next guy out, but like you said, if they maybe changed out Royalty for another player, I don't know who that player would really be, but if they made that move and they still weren't finding the success that they expected, I would definitely think that Hydra is essentially untouchable at the moment, because it doesn't make any sense to drop him, and I would I I would say that Krim would be the guy at that point, just as speculation, just because Glacier has kind of a connection with Hydra from last season, and he's been with the Subliners and kind of, and definitely their biggest player in their franchise's history so far. So at that point, maybe Krim. I don't really know. I hope that they can get it together. It'd be fun to see two of the GOATs, come back up and be one of the best teams, but at the moment they are by far one of the worst teams in the league, and it's going to take quite a bit to get them out of like that bottom four right now. But we'll see what happens. And just a fact check, the Subliners are 3-12 in hardpoint, which is a far cry from what they were last year, where they were one of the top hardpoint teams once Hydra came into the lineup. I think at one point they were like 9-1 or something with Hydra in hardpoint. So things have definitely changed, and changed for the worse for New York, but we'll see what happens as we get into the second set of qualifying matches. And in the final losers bracket round one match, we had the Seattle Surge, who lost to OpTic Texas in the first round of the winners bracket, and the Paris Legion, who entered the major with no wins. They were 0-5 in their qualifying matches, and they were one of the few teams that actually made a roster change. They decided to just outright release Decimate and bring in Tom Gravity, who was formerly a part of like FaZe Academy, and he had never been in the CDL before. So they brought in Gravity. We talked about it last week on the preview show that we weren't expecting a whole bunch of changes. Essentially, we didn't expect an incredible improvement from Paris with such a short time before the major. We were kind of wrong about that. They came out and they beat the Seattle Surge. This is definitely an upset. They beat them 3-2, and they achieved their first victory of the CDL season, and they send the Surge home without a win at the major, despite us and many others really saying that they were one of the best teams in the league at one point this season, when they were 2-0 or 3-0 or whatever. So the Surge, they go out without a win. The Legion, they move on. Give me your thoughts, because we talk about Paris way more than you would expect us to, considering they're one of the last place teams and they don't really win a lot. But what do you think of this?
I was fairly surprised.
Yeah.
Especially, heading into the match, was fully expecting Seattle to just take this one, even though they had lost to OpTic. Just like you said, it was, Paris coming in with a new team, limited practice with gravity, all that yada yada. And then map one comes and Seattle takes it 250 to 138 fairly convincingly. And I'm just sitting there, like, okay, yeah, this, Seattle's going to take care of business, no problem. Then we go to Desert Sea Search map 2, and Seattle goes up big early. I believe it was 4-1. I could be wrong on that. But either way, Paris makes the comeback in that. And it comes down to a round 11, and Paris ends up winning the search to tie the series. And you're thinking, like, okay, maybe Seattle probably should have closed that one out, no big deal, and just let Paris win a map, whatever. Seattle wins the Tuscan Control 3-2, up 2-1 in the series, with a hard point coming up after they looked so strong in the game one hard point. Again, I'm thinking, like, okay, over 3-1 for Seattle, forget about it. But Paris comes in, takes care of business. Last two maps are Berlin. They win Berlin, hardpoint 250, 186. Not as big of a lead as Seattle in game one, but that's still a fairly convincing victory, scoreline wise. And then they win the game five search 6-3. So Paris, if you want to call it a honeymoon phase, if, beginner's luck, whatever you want to say, just regardless, doesn't matter. Paris came out, got the win. I also thought it was really funny, and people have been memeing on social media too about the fact that they had like the entire team on stage after the victory for a post-game interview as if they had just won the tournament or won champs. But yeah, congrats to Paris for finally getting a win. Obviously, as we'll talk about it, their tournament does not continue for much longer beyond this match, but this is, I would say it's a bigger win for Paris. No, I don't want to say that. This is a bad loss for Seattle, all things considered, just because they're on such a downward trajectory right now from multiple losses in a row, I believe. So they went 0-2 at the major, and they were on a 2-game losing streak to end the online qualifiers. I think they
believe
went
so,
3-2.
yes.
Yeah, so they're on a 4-match losing streak now. I don't know where they go from here. It is worth noting I believe they announced before this match on Friday, because I don't think they did it on the first day of the major, but they did announce that Seattle brought back Classic as a substitute. I thought that was an interesting move. Maybe they were thinking they might match up with FaZe in the tournament, and they wanted to have the Nicky D boost just in case.
Maybe.
I don't really know, but yeah, I'm not sure what they would do from here. With this lineup before like all the preseason expectations and people claiming they were one of the best teams in the game, all that, like this was still a young team with I don't like when people say Mac is a veteran. That drives me crazy. This is a team with one veteran, one guy who's played 1.5 years in the CDL, and 2 rookies. So it's still a young team, minus accuracy.
And a rookie head coach.
Yeah. So in my eyes, like this is a team I don't expect them to make a change because of this struggles. It's just a team that especially with the signs of brilliance and promise that we've seen from Pred and Sib so far. Like I feel like they're gonna want to continue to work around them, develop them, try to get the most out of them when they can, and just figure out how to consistently, like Sib was dropping MVP numbers early in the season. It's just going to come down to how they can consistently bring that out of him, I guess. So this is another case where although Seattle had a disappointing tournament, and I don't think anybody would have assumed they came in top 12 here, we're just going to have to see how they respond in the upcoming matches.
Yeah, Seattle for me is an interesting case because they surprised me and surprised a lot of people with how they played early in the season and in the preseason when they went to whatever the winners bracket finals or whatever of the preseason cup. But I mean they're surprising, but like you said, we should expect some ups and downs from a young roster like this. It's not often that a team with 2 rookies and I mean they're like the Dallas Empires even, that in the first season when Shotzi and Illy were part of that roster and people expected them to immediately be one of the top rosters, and they struggled, and it took them a little bit of time, and really it took them until like things went online that they really hit their stride, even though they did, I believe, win that last land major before COVID destroyed the world and everything. So it'll take some time. I don't know if this is like the roster that's going to be super competitive. I think that personally, I always had a little bit of hesitation with Sib because of his personality, because people had been talking about essentially like how he is as a player and like his persona in his teams. And sometimes that can be kind of distracting. I don't know if that plays into it at all, but I didn't think that it was I don't know. That's just something that concerns me, because usually you just hear glowing reviews about players when they come up from challengers to the pros, and I don't think that it was all glowing for him, which is unusual. But he's super talented, and I think they have a lot of room to grow if this roster sticks together, especially with Accuracy, who I think is a really good leader and can help a lot of players. The Paris Legion, that's incredibly surprising. I mean, we talk about Paris as winning champs a lot, and almost all of it is in jest, but the fans were behind them for this match, which was super surprising, and it's partially because they usually are bad and they don't win a lot, but it was very cool to see them pull off this win, even if it was at the expense of Seattle, who has a lot of potential. And I actually skipped over one of the matches in the losers bracket, but Florida versus Boston. We both picked Florida for this, and this was one of the most frustrating matches for me to watch because I expect so much out of Florida, and this match just made absolutely no sense. Let's just go to game 4, because back and forth in game 1, 2, and 3, but game 4, Awakening, he has a 37-13 hardpoint game, and they still lose the map. I don't know what like the highest KD for a player that lost the map is in like CDL history or whatever, but I would imagine it's got to be this, like to drop,
especially for a hard point.
yeah, to drop, like to have a 24, like a plus 24 kill difference, like that is incredible. And even Octane, who has had his fair share of matches where he goes off and his team loses the hard point, even he was like, oh, it goes 37-13, his team must have won by 100 or whatever, but they didn't. And I think so he got Awakening got a little bit of pushback on Twitter because people said like he's a kill whore, he's not getting in the hill or whatever, and Skies had like over 2 minutes of hill time, which was incredible. But you have that, and then game 5, Florida just kind of collapses. Like they had a lot of chances to win that final search and destroy. They end up losing it. Just a wild. I believe that. Yeah, so Zenny, he had the ninja, which he got protected at the very end, but just a really ridiculous set of circumstances for Florida to lose this 3-2. I've given my thoughts, and I'm already getting a little worked up thinking about it again, but what did you think of Boston's win over Florida here?
Yeah, this was definitely a head scratcher of a series, and I think you summed it up pretty well. To hit the matches you didn't talk about, or the games rather, Florida did take Bokic hardpoint to start 250, 159. Boston takes Bokic search 6-5, and Florida wins the control 3-1, setting up the Tuscan hardpoint that you talked about. And that was a game I wanted to go back and rewatch just so I could kind of try to analyze exactly where I sit in the, big way kill whoring or not debate. Unfortunately, I didn't get to do that before this podcast, so maybe I'll do it like later this week and see if I have to bring it up. I don't know. Regardless, I think just the big thing that sticks out to me with if he's 37-13, and then the next highest number of kills on either team, Skies had 22 and TJ Halley had 21. Nobody else had over 20 kills on either team. So that like screams to me like not even necessarily kill whoring, like looking at the numbers, like obviously he might have been to some extent, but I feel like, that's just like a case of like a superstar slayer. Like we've seen the big wake moments in the past, and he's just like frying in his zone and just trying to kill everything he sees on the map. So I'm not sure. It's definitely an anomaly. I feel like it's just an absurd stat line, and I don't know, like you said, if we'll ever see a scenario like this again where someone's dropping like a 2.8 KD and losing a hard point. Um, but yeah, and then we go to the game 5, and my big takeaway. I was going to hit on this at the end, once we got through the entire major, but I'm just going to say it now because I'm getting worked up about it. Just thinking about it, it's just all these ninjas on Desert Siege. Like, I'm a huge fan of ninjas, and you know I go for them frequently when I'm playing competitive matches, but it gets to a point where these guys are professionals. Like someone's just got to check the bomb or call it out. Like it's you know in my eyes, it's cool to see ninjas because they don't really happen that frequently. But I felt like there were a ton of ninjas this entire weekend throughout the major, more than usual. So, and I feel like most of them happen on Desert Siege too. So I don't know. That's kind of a weird map, but I'm not a huge fan of it. And I mean, it was played quite often. I feel like this weekend, so maybe the pros like it. But or it also comes down to not having much map variety, or maybe it's just one where they felt like some of the teams felt like they could catch some other teams off guard. I'm not really sure, but I guess that's one other thing we'll have to look at moving forward is if we continue to see ninjas on Desert Siege in particular, what like the response is to that. The only other thing I did want to bring up here is just because of that massive slaying performance by Awakening in the Game 4 in particular, he did set the new record as far as I'm aware. I've been trying to keep track throughout the year, but based on like breaking points, post game scoreboard, box scores, whatever, Awakening had 119 kills in this series overall, which is the new record for most kills in a Vanguard series.
Yeah, to your point about ninja diffuses, I think partially it's like a lack of practice. Like it's so earlier in the season that it might happen more now than it will in like 3 or 4 months. But at the same point, like, I mean, just check the bomb, bro. Like, if Coach Trim can yell at you and Jim and all of his GB teammates to check the bomb, like pros can definitely check the bomb at least once. And it's really frustrating when it's multiple rounds where essentially like the team that planted essentially loses it because they're not checking the bomb or they're not in a position to really check the bomb, and that's very frustrating as a viewer to watch these teams do that. um, but that's it for the losers bracket round one. We did have another losers bracket match, round two, the Los Angeles Thieves versus the Minnesota Rocker. The Rocker, they beat the Gorillas in the losers bracket round one. The Thieves, they had lost to Toronto and then beat New York in the losers bracket. And the Thieves, they moved on. They beat Minnesota 3-1. They eliminated the Rocker from the tournament. We've spent a lot of time on the on the bracket now that I'm looking at it, but any thoughts on the Rocker in their performances?
I think this was, looking at the teams on paper, this kind of goes the way you expect it. Minnesota wins the search, but LAT takes all three respawns. Um, Not really super surprised with that. It is worth mentioning this kind of like another trend that I was talking about. I mentioned earlier that LAT looked good in hardpoint. They also look good on Gavutu hardpoint in particular. And there's kind of like the meme going on from Kenny originally that it was like if you load into Gavutu hardpoint against us, just leave or whatever.
That
So
didn't come back to
and
bite them or anything.
up till now, it was kind of funny here that, in my eyes, Minnesota like took the challenge of trying to play the Mangavutu, and they ended up uh, not being able to win. But I believe I didn't open the stats for this one yet. Um, just because, yeah, so Attach did have the highest KDM Minnesota 91 and 74. Um, and I felt like he did play well with an AR on Gavutu, so it could have been a situation, this team in particular, they have like Attach and Priesta, who in my eyes are both like flexish players. Like they have both performed throughout their careers well on ARs and subs. So maybe like the Minnesota coaching staff just felt like Avutu kind of fit the team well with being able to have attach on an AR alongside Priesta and Major Maniac. Not sure, but Rocker hasn't been exactly like a super strong team in the respawns all year, so like they could have been trying something out here. I don't know, but we don't have to spend too much time on this. This kind of just went as expected.
The other loser bracket round 2 match was Boston Breach versus the Paris Legion. The Boston Breach had beaten the Mutineers in their first losers bracket match, and after losing to Atlanta FaZe, and the Legion, of course, beat the Surge in their losers bracket match. In this match, we had Boston beating Paris. You actually went with Paris, which was surprising to me. I guess you were really drinking the Kool-Aid after that Surge win.
Oh yeah.
I almost never pick Boston to win. I actually went with Boston, in the Breach win 3-1. What were you thinking about Paris after this match?
That was it for me. In my head, I was going with the storyline and the honeymoon phase, thinking, this wasn't necessarily like the toughest matchup. Like if it was Paris on the other side of the bracket playing the Thieves, there I wasn't picking Paris, but this was just one, especially coming off the high of that first one. I could have seen Paris taking it one, and you could make the argument that they should have at least um, gone up 2-0 in the series.
Yeah.
They looked strong on Bokage. It was a 9-point victory on Bokage that came down to the wire, and they had the listen in during map one where I can't remember exactly how Temp said it, but he said something funny. It was like we gotta basically he was like we gotta lock it in or something, and then he just like turned up and went massive towards the end of the game and helped them close that out. And then there was the string of rounds that was really frustrating to me in particular. Probably most because I picked Paris to win. But just like as a fan of Search and Destroy 2, I was kind of just like, what the heck is going on here? I don't remember exactly when I can look because I have the clip of TJ's 1v3, I believe. Yeah, so Paris was up 3-2 on Berlin Search, which was the second game. So in round 6, TJ gets a 1v3 to tie it up 3-3. Then the next round, Paris is on offense and they plant the bomb at B, but they don't stretch the plan enough. So for those that don't know, Berlin, for whatever reason, like if you plant the bomb on the B bomb site of Berlin, which is towards the water side of the map, most teams back up to the spawn building and you can see the bomb from there. But you have to kind of plant the bomb more to the right, and Paris didn't do that, which allowed like Capsule to kind of just like basically he didn't really like stretch it, but like for whatever reason Paris didn't have the angle to see him, and he got the defuse off when Paris had the advantage there with the bomb down and everything. I think they had a man advantage as well. So that was a weird one, and that let Boston go up 4-3. And then the following round, Boston got a 2v4 to go up 5-3. So if you swing those rounds the other way, which those are all 3 winnable rounds for Paris, in my opinion, that's a 6-2 victory instead of being down 5-3. So that was just something I noticed while watching that series, and I was kind of like mind blown, I guess you could say. And then from there, Paris, convincingly wins Tuscan Control 3-1. I think that's where Nero had like the nasty spree. He went on like a 6 streak or something. I'm pretty sure it was that map, but it was on Tuscan, so it could have been another series, but I think it was this one. And then Boston wins Berlin Hardpoint 250-145 to close things out.
We had London versus Toronto in a winners bracket match, winners bracket round 2. You went with Toronto, I went with London. I was actually at this point after London came out and they won their opening match, I was just kind of like on the bandwagon at that point. So I went with London. I actually ended up winning this one. Honestly, like London just deserves a ton of credit. They looked really, really good this entire stage, set of matches, whatever. At the major, they looked pretty good, and online, they looked good as well, and beat a strong Toronto team. Any thoughts on this match?
Yeah, like I kind of mentioned with Toronto's earlier match, this is another case where Toronto only wins the search. They don't win any of the respawns. London has looked good in respawn early this year, so wasn't necessarily surprised by that. But in my head, I guess I was, kind of going with the prediction of predicting against London, which I've done all season so far, and two, expecting Toronto to get find a way to get to the Game 5 search and then probably close it out from that angle. But like you said, credit to London, they get the job done, secure that winners bracket final spot, and looked good from there, really.
And in the most anticipated match of the weekend to that point, Atlanta FaZe versus OpTic Texas in the winners bracket round 2 match. We both picked Atlanta, and we've been known to do that on this podcast. But OpTic, they end up upsetting Atlanta. They win 3-2 despite Atlanta looking like world beaters. In the first 2 maps, we had a BZ egging the crowd on and like letting them know and like waving them on and everything. And yeah, just it didn't work out. Like everything looked so good in those first 2 maps. Simp even looked like one of the best players of all time in the game 2, but OpTic, they just turned up in the map 3. This was the match that I noticed, like, control absolutely sucks if you're on offense. So and I believe that round 5 defense was like 100% win percentage this weekend, which is a really great thing for Call of Duty, I guess. But yeah, I just noticed it during this one that it was almost impossible for FaZe to break on offense. But yeah, OpTic, they end up winning 3-2 and they advance to the winners bracket finals. What are your thoughts on this really, really great match?
Yeah, it was a good match. A lot of takeaways actually from this one. I do want to bring up, I forgot to mention it, just because it's been a while and I kind of forgot it actually happened during that match. But during the London Toronto match, the CDL Twitter account actually called the Game 2 search between London and Toronto the longest S&D in CDL history. And the reason for that is there was multiple delays. I think there was 2 game crashes and 2 technical issues or pauses or whatever. So that was a frustrating one. It literally like added an hour on to the broadcast just in delays. But I did want to bring that up because I just forgot to mention it when we were talking about that one. But back to Atlanta and OpTic, this was, up to this point, it had to have been like the series of the tournament. Like there was cool storylines and other series throughout the tournament up to this point too. But, this was just a banger of a match. Like you mentioned, like Abizi was super amped during the map 1 listen in, and they, FaZe goes up 2-0 and it's looking, like just especially after FaZe had the 3-0 win over Boston, we're looking at them being in control away from a 6-0 perfect start to the tournament and map count. But OpTic kicks it into another gear. They're able to win the control. From there, it goes to the Gavutu hardpoint, which was a cool map to see in this series in particular because I know I've talked about Gavutu from the Atlanta FaZe perspective just because of like the AR dominance of the map and having to have one of the tiny terrors running that third AR. But if you think about it, OpTic from like a team perspective, they also have, like Scump and Shotzi, both primarily SMG players. So one of them would have to run that third AR. And in this map in particular, we see Scump just absolutely fry with the automaton, which I thought was pretty cool to see. And if he's able to replicate that throughout the entire season, that is just like a deadly weapon for OpTic because, even though Scump is known for his SMG play, if he's able to continue to perform that well with an AR on Gavutu, he can either force teams to have to ban Gavutu against OpTic to set up like him being able to play on an SMG favored map, or OpTic just continues to pick it, and that's like a strong suit for them throughout the season. So I could see that going either way, and it's an element to OpTic Texas that I will personally keep an eye on because apparently I have a thing for looking out for Gavutu stats. So And then after that, just probably the most surprising thing from this series in my eyes was the 6-0 nature of the Game 5 search. FaZe has, aside from the time early in the season last year that we talked about where FaZe kind of went through the struggles in search. I think it was stage 2 leading into stage 3 before they brought Tupac on. I know I brought it up a bunch. Outside of that little period, just FaZe have been such a strong search and destroy team. And for them to get 6-0'd in this fashion, I think Abizi dropped the donut. Shotzi was just getting a lot of first bloods. And if you're watching the video format of this right now too, you're going to see Illy get the fuse here in that sixth and final round. It was a very close one, in my opinion. I tried to slow down the video as much as possible, and in real time, it didn't look like to me he got to the bomb to like 7.3. Obviously, it takes 7.5 to defuse. When you slowed it down, it kind of looked like he started at 7.4, but either way, the game gave him the defuse, and OpTic comes up with a huge 6-0 statement win there in the Game 5 to pull off the reverse sweep against, at the time, the undefeated Atlanta FaZe.
Yeah, this felt like an E United series, like an E United series before they started winning all the time, because they had a reputation of melting down after going up like 2-0 and really like letting teams back into series, and it just felt like that. It like even especially when it got to the search, it really seemed like Atlanta had just completely lost full, and that's very that's very unusual for FaZe because even when they let teams back into series, which isn't very often, they seem to be able to finish out series pretty well. But this one, they just looked really really bad in the back half of the series. Beezy in particular, which was really surprising. I noticed it on Game 4 Hardpoint where it really seemed like he was the catalyst. Like, had he had a good map, they probably would have won because he wasn't able to put as much pressure on OpTic as he usually was, and instead he was kind of just like feeding Scump kills and letting him get bigger and bigger and essentially just snowball the game from there. But yeah, really surprising series. I expected a lot better out of Abizi, and this is maybe one of the series. Like even in defeat, I kind of noticed like Abizi might be the more valuable player to FaZe than Simp because when Abizi is not doing as well as he can, it does seem to be a bigger problem than if Simp isn't performing up to what we think he's capable of. So a really interesting series and kind of we'll go back to it. We'll talk about OpTic Atlanta a little bit later as well. But yeah, just a really, really great series out of OpTic in Atlanta here. And in the next match, we had Toronto and Boston. Toronto, they win 3-2. For some reason, I went with Boston for this one. I'm not really sure. Maybe I was just so hyped up from their cool losers bracket run to that point. But Toronto, they win 3-2. Despite not being able to really win hardpoint, which is a weird thing for the Ultra, but I guess if you don't need to, I guess you might as well just win searches and controls. Any thoughts on Ultra and Breach?
This one, we don't have to spend too much time on it,
Yeah.
but I didn't even really notice it until the broadcast brought it up. Like, obviously, it makes sense now, but I just wasn't thinking about it coming into the match. But this was a revenge match for Zinni after being benched last year by Toronto and replaced by Insight. He was going up against, 3 of his former teammates and the guy who replaced him. So I thought that was a pretty cool storyline, and I believe he tweeted like after the match like how much he really wanted it, and he played pretty well during the series too, if I remember. But just at the end, Toronto, it comes down to a search, and Toronto is able to win the searches. Yeah, Zinni went 90 and 71 for a 1.27 KD, which is the highest KD in the series. Nero actually dropped 100 kills, which was the most um, on either team, but I guess that makes sense just because, Boston was winning the respawns or the hard points. And then Toronto wins 2-3-5. So makes sense in that regard that they might be outslayed, but Toronto was able to win the searches, and Despite, like you said, not winning hardpoint up to this point still, they're somehow staying alive.
Next match was Los Angeles Thieves and the Atlanta FaZe. I mean, this was a really cool series to watch because FaZe were rebounding off of their loss against OpTic, and the Thieves were trying to stay alive as well. And we got to see Gavutu hardpoint after those memes, and some of them, based in fact. Obviously, the Thieves were really good at Gavutu hardpoint, but Celium took that to heart. He absolutely spit on LAT here, 35-12, a 2.92 KD. And unlike Awakening, his team was actually able to win this map. They won 250-169 to force a game 5, and that game 5 was Berlin Search and Abizi and Simp combined for 21 kills and 162. So they pulled off a reverse sweep. After losing the first 2 maps, they were on a 5-map losing streak, which is very unusual for FaZe to do. But they're able to win this series and eliminate the Thieves. Your thoughts on this match?
Yeah, this was a tough draw either way, just based on how the bracket worked out. Either Atlanta or LA Thieves were going home with a top 6 placing, and in my eyes, both teams are obviously better than top 6. But it's just the way the bracket worked out. And yeah, it was looking not great for Atlanta early on. The coming off the reverse sweep, they lose the first 2 maps of this series against LA Thieves. So it was a 5-map losing streak, but I guess Atlanta's never out of it, and they were able to bounce back somehow and take the reverse sweep win 3-2 to eliminate LA Thieves. I was impressed in particular by I guess both teams did have some good nades in the search, but I was just really impressed by LA Thieves' nade usage. It felt like up to this point in the tournament, obviously they had the loss to Toronto where they won the hard points but lost the searches. So I'm sure, like, statistically, if you looked at it, they probably didn't have the best search record this weekend. But I felt like, as the tournament progressed, they might have been starting to get a better grasp of it. And like the team nades was a good example of it. That they seem to have good coordination with their nades, which gave them, an early man advantage in multiple rounds. And in particular, I don't remember. I think it was Kenny who was L on Tuscan. He threw the first nade, and then Envoy followed it up and got a double in round 11. So, like, just by using their equipment, the Thieves were able to, get a 4v2 man advantage in round 11, which, you shouldn't lose those situations, especially at a pro level. So that basically was, what allowed them to seal the deal there and go up 2-0 in the series. So that's something I'm going to look at for the Thieves moving forward, is if they continue to improve in search, or if we continue to see good nades out of them in particular in the searches. But yeah, this is a huge win obviously for Atlanta, allowed them to stay in it. And I think the main takeaway for me, I guess for both teams, we were able to see FaZe bounce back and regain after losing 5 maps in a row, I should say. And for the Thieves, I think they still have a lot of potential and they're a really good team. I would be comfortable saying they're a top 4 team in the game right now. I think depending on where you put London, I think you can make an argument that, London is probably like 3rd or 4th. And if you don't have London 3rd, maybe you could put LAT as high as 3rd right now. I was really impressed with their performance despite their end result or final placing, I guess you could say. I think if they continue to play this well in hardpoint, they're going to be a scary team for the rest of the year.
I agree. I would say definitely top 4, maybe top 3, depending on the day.
Yeah.
First match of Sunday was OpTic versus London in the winners bracket final. I went with London, you went with OpTic, and it's on the screen right now for anybody watching the video version. OpTic, they win 3-1 in this series. London, they were able to take that first hard point 250-178 on Berlin. But OpTic just completely dominated the search and the control. A rare 3-0 win for OpTic on Gavutu control. 6-0 Berlin search, which is incredible considering they also 6-0'd FaZe in the Game 5 search in that last series. And then they finished out on Tuscan Hardpoint 250 to 171. Any thoughts on this as OpTic just continued to roll at this point?
Yeah, I think you hit most of the key points I was looking at. The only thing, obviously, like you mentioned, London did take map one hardpoint on Berlin to open up 1-0. But then the big round for me, and possibly what could have just, completely shifted the momentum just overall in the series, was the opening round of map two. Berlin Search and Destroy. Illy gets the 1v3 clutch, and I believe it was like a two-piece with the pistol after playing the bomb or something like that. That's just a huge momentum shift, right? Especially after losing map one and then being in that 1v3 situation. Like if OpTic loses that first round, who knows what happens from there. I'm not saying London would have just like smoked them in the search, but obviously being able to win such a hype clutch like that in the opening round after a loss was probably like a huge momentum boost, especially with the green wall and the crowd behind them. That was like, for me, that was like the key turning point in this match. And then, as you said, OpTic kind of just, turned up from there, 6-0 in the search, 3-0 control, and then 80-point win in the hard point to move on to the grand finals.
Yeah. So in Atlanta, in the next match, they beat Toronto 3-0. I picked against Atlanta stupidly for some reason on this one. But yeah, Atlanta, they beat the Ultra. They eliminate the Ultra from the tournament with the top four. And the Ultra, even though they got top four, they never won a hard point. Just kind of a ridiculous stat that doesn't usually happen.
Nope.
But that's how things go. And Atlanta also they won the London series right after this. But first, let's go to the Toronto series. Any thoughts on the match?
I think this was, to me, in my eyes, like in my head, I was anticipating picking Atlanta to still win this tournament based on the fact, they had the losers bracket run they had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like we touched on it before, due to the format of like playing the consecutive matches, I just felt like Atlanta was going to take this one and then go from there and just increasingly heat up. And this was as good of a start as you could have hoped for in my case, or if you were an Atlanta FaZe fan, if you were thinking along the same lines as me. A convincing 3-0 like this against Toronto. In my head, I'm thinking like, okay, here we go. FaZe is about to turn up and take care of business here, make that incredible run to possibly another championship. But like you said, that the biggest takeaway for me here is Toronto getting top four without winning a hard point is just absurd. And I think that goes back to we were just kind of mentioning LA Thieves being like a top four team or whatever. Although Toronto gets a top four placing here because of their hard point struggles in particular, I probably wouldn't have them in that top four if I was to like do a power ranking right now. But we're gonna have to see how Toronto responds to their performance in hardpoint. I would expect, they got a good coaching staff there, Toronto, Marky B, and those guys. So I expect them to get back to the grind right away and try to fix hardpoint. They got a lot of talent on that team, so I think they'll be able to figure it out. But that's certainly something we're gonna have to keep our eyes on heading into this second or this week's matches later on.
Yeah, if they can fix their hardpoint woes, then they could probably be like a grand finals team, to be honest, because they got this far without winning a very important game mode. So maybe just a little bit of improvement can help them a lot. And like I said, Atlanta, they beat London 3-1. This was not like a super convincing win, although it could have been a 3-0. FaZe won Tuscan Hardpoint 250 to 177, and we're actually up 5-2, or 5-1, excuse me, in Game 2 Desert Siege Search, and they actually choked away that win. London win 6-5. At FaZe, they bounced back 3-2 on Tuscan Control, and then won 250 to 172 on Gavutu Hardpoint. But just a good win, obviously, because London is a very good team, but it could have been a 3-0 for FaZe. What do you think of this match?
Yeah, this was, pure momentum based in my opinion, like coming from a prediction standpoint. London's coming off the loss to OpTic. FaZe is coming off a convincing victory over Toronto. So I was just expecting FaZe to carry that momentum, take care of business here. I was kind of just like, I don't really want to say mind blown, but I was just shocked by the game two performance. I'm pretty sure, like you said, it was a 5-1 choke. I would have to go back and look to make sure, but I was super surprised either way that London was able to make the comeback there, especially in a search. When it seemed like FaZe was in control again. And, it might have been a little worrying for FaZe fans or anybody expecting FaZe to make that miraculous run there. But despite that, FaZe are still able to take the respawns here and move on to the grand finals for a rematch against OpTic.
Yeah, this grand finals best of 9 as usual with these majors. But no advantage for OpTic coming from winners bracket other than getting to veto one hard point map, which they ended up vetoing Bokage, which is no fun because Bokage should always be in the rotation. But OpTic, they end up getting this one map veto, and I picked OpTic to win. I was fully out on FaZe at this point, especially with how well OpTic played against them in the first series and played against London as well. So I went with OpTic, you went with FaZe. OpTic, they end up winning the series 5-2. Pretty incredible way to cap off this tournament, to see the two most popular teams play against each other in a rematch of what I consider to be the most entertaining match in the tournament before that. So just a really, really cool tournament in all, and a great way to finish it. What do you think of this grand final series, a 5-2 win for OpTic?
Yeah, this is the heavy hitter, right?
Yep.
Like you kind of said, just in passing, mentioning the map set or veto process there, just due to the lack of maps in Vanguard right now. There's only 10 maps in the competitive rotation, 4 hardpoint, 4 searches, and 2 controls. That means for a best of 9, you're only taking away one of the hard points. So that's something I feel like we're going to have to revisit moving on in the year. People have made the argument about like the winner's bracket advantage or a lack thereof in past CDL tournaments, and I kind of, with the best of 9 format, I know in the MW champs they did it where like the team that came from winners bracket started up 1-0 in the grand finals. I wasn't a huge fan of that, just like giving them a map win. I thought that was kind of weird. But I also do agree that in some form, the team from the winners bracket who hasn't lost up to this point does deserve some form of an advantage. And in my eyes, usually like having a veto advantage would be considered, at least to an extent, slightly an advantage. Probably not as big of an advantage as fans of the team coming from the winners bracket would like, but no matter how you look at it, that still gives that team at least some sort of an edge if they're able to, be the home team for the vetoes or however you want to look at it. But if they're only getting to, remove one hard point, I think that's something we'll have to look at moving forward and see how the CDL addresses that. But probably not going to see anything of that unless we get some maps added. Hopefully a control map is added, so we actually have some changes in the veto for that. But enough about the pre-match stuff. Just right away, opening this series for the grand finals, we see Gavutu hardpoint, and kind of like we touched on in the previous matchup there between OpTic and FaZe, where Scump was just playing very heavily with the automaton. I was kind of, it made sense it was the first map, but at the same time, FaZe was coming off the win against the Gavutu Demons of LA Thieves, followed up by a win against London, the very last map they played, Gavutu Hardpoint against London, leading up to the grand final. So they had their reps in, maybe could have made like some tweaks or whatever to try and change things in the rematch against OpTic, but it turns out OpTic actually wins this one more convincingly than the first time they played. They take it 250 to 130, and the first time OpTic and FaZe played, it was 250 to 186. So I was kind of surprised there. That, in my eyes, we talked about like that losers bracket steamroll of momentum from the team that's like playing those consecutive series. In my eyes, the first example that always jumps out to me is when Stage 5 Major last year, when Toronto played Minnesota, and like they had like the 250 to like 40 checkmate hardpoint to open that best of 9. Um, that's just like the best example in my head that always sticks out. So like coming into this for OpTic to kind of like flip the script on that and just come out with a dominant victory right away, in my eyes, I was kind of like, thinking, okay, OpTic's here to play. They're not letting FaZe jump out to any kind of lead, and I was pretty impressed by that. It does come down to around 11 in the Desert Siege search, I think. If I remember correctly, they had the I'm drawing a blank. I think it was Arcides who like hopped on the bomb early in the round 11. I think it was like a 4v4 situation still after OpTic had planted it. And he was like halfway done with the defuse and nobody on OpTic had checked. And then somebody got a kill and like he hopped off it. I think it was someone on FaZe gets a kill. But he hopped off it. Maybe the kill was close by or something. And then somebody else was able to get back on the defuse a second time and complete it before OpTic, and he checked it. So that comes back to what we were talking about with, checking the bomb, ninjas, all that stuff. But it was a pretty entertaining map too. It's always exciting when we see round 11 situations and stuff like that. But immediately following that, OpTic comes out, continues to, at least in this grand finals scenario, they take the Gavutu control 3-2. Was some controversy around this one with Arcides lagging or freezing on his PC. I believe he was the one who like requested a pause early in the game. Nothing was done about it. And then in the final round, the round 5, FaZe were on offense on Gavutu and had a 14-5 kill advantage, which means they only have to get 2 more kills to stop OpTic from having respawns. And like RC started lagging and just OpTic got like all the kills in a row, and they ended up replaying it. OpTic closed it out regardless of that, but that was definitely something that put like kind of like a damper on the grand finals, I guess you could say, early on, just because in my eyes, I felt like that was a scenario where maybe if Arcides isn't running into that situation, FaZe is able to close out their advantage and take the win, go up 2-1 in the series. Who knows what happens from there? But I don't want to blame the series on that or anything like that. And obviously, they did the fairest thing they could with a replay, and OpTic was able to take care of business. So I think, just got to move on from that and deal with it. And then after that, we see OpTic take another hard point, Tuscan hard point 250 to 212. We stay on Tuscan for the search, and Atlanta take that one 6-3, which was noteworthy in my eyes because that's the map that OpTic got the 6-0 win on in their previous reverse sweep earlier in the tournament. But then from there, OpTic doesn't let Atlanta win another map. They take Tuscan control and Berlin search to close it out, get their first championship in a while. If depending on how you categorize it, it was the first championship for the OpTic brand since like the Vegas tournament and the start of Black Ops 4. But obviously we had the Huntsman situation, and the Huntsman won like events in MW. So like Scump has had land titles since then and online titles for that fact, but they didn't win last year in Cold War. So no matter how you look at it, it had been, a long time since, Scump / OpTic lifted a trophy. So for many fans, it was a cool moment. And I think, at the end of the day, even though I predicted FaZe to win and I was thinking they were going to pull this one out, I think it's a cool storyline to have OpTic take this opening major of the year, be back on top. I think it's something good for viewership, obviously, and exciting for a lot of fans.
Yeah, it's also exciting for the CDO, I'm sure. CDO General Manager Daniel Say tweeted as we were doing this podcast, actually,
Yeah.
quote, official numbers are in. Major 1 hit a peak viewership of 186,000 and averaged 143,000 across CDL Sunday, was our best performing major since the CDL's inception. I mean, we kind of thought that would be the case. I think I even mentioned it, maybe you mentioned it as well, about from last week, that FaZe versus OpTic would be really big because these are the two biggest organizations in COD. The rivalry, it goes back multiple games to like Advanced Warfare, where these two teams are battling it out to see who is the best team. So it was great to see that they played not once but twice this tournament. We got to see a lot of great Call of Duty as a result, and I think maybe it's just me being optimistic, but I think that FaZe will come out a lot better because of this. I mean, it's not very often that they lose in general, but to lose to the same team twice, and once in one series was 5-2, so it wasn't even really close. I think that we'll see a much improved FaZe team over the next several months because of this. But OpTic, this has got to feel really good for them, considering they, like you said, didn't have much success last year in the way of winning tournaments, and it's been a long time coming for the OpTic brand because we had the fake OpTic situation with OpTic LA and all that. So it's been a long time for the Green Wall, but they got to experience a huge win. And I mean, they got to keep it up, but right now they look to be the best team in the world, undoubtedly, because they beat, I think, all of the other top contenders other than maybe LAT. So just an incredible weekend for OpTic Texas and their fans, and an incredible week for the Call of Duty League for sure.
Yeah. I was talking way too much and was running out of gas there
Yeah.
when I was going through the matches. But I did forget to mention in particular, just real quick, during the Tuscan control, there was a blunder on the side of FaZe there in the round 4 where they like miscalculated the kills because they were on offense and they just decided to not capture the point. So it seemed as if they like did the math and assumed they would be on defense going into overtime. So like they were basically forfeiting that round to keep a kills advantage and have defense. But something was, whoever was calculating the kills or whatever, it was off, and you know, Atlanta ended up hitting offense, which, as you kind of pointed out, just was super, control was super defensively favored all weekend long, but in particular in the round 5s. I think I saw that same stat as you, where it was, somebody was said it was like 10-0 for defense in round 5s or something ridiculous. So wanted to bring that up. That was kind of a strange one for me that I was slightly confused about. But outside of that too, if we look at the final slang numbers or the final box score provided by Breaking Point here, I thought it was kind of interesting that Illy and Abizi both had the most kills in the series, and it was only 119. And I'm only saying only because this was a 7-map series, and that's the same number of kills that Big Wake dropped earlier in this tournament to set that kills record in a best of 5. Now, one thing I could say that probably contributed to that is because of the best of 9 format, there were 3 searches played in 7 maps. So that means there was only 4 respawns played in 7 maps as opposed to 3 respawns and 5. But I still thought it was interesting that it was literally like the same number. So like there's not even like a discrepancy in my mind to keep track for the kills count. Like I still give it to Big Wake because he did it in fewer maps. But I guess for the grand finals moving forward to the majors throughout the year and the champs, we're gonna have to see if we get any absurd kill counts in like if we get a 9-map series or something like that. It would be cool to see if we get like somebody pushing 150.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a possibility that will happen at some point in the season. Let's get to these the predictions. This has been a long show. Obviously, I didn't even know until yesterday that the league started right back up this weekend. I thought we would have a break and we could all enjoy a weekend off of
Oh,
Call of Duty, but guess that's
come
not the
on. We
case.
talked about it last time.
I know, but it just completely slipped my mind. I was not focused on it. I wasn't ready for it. But before we get into the predictions, you are currently 30-18 this season. You were 10-8 at the major. We did the thing where we don't pick every game or every match before the tournament. We go like day by day, and however the results are, we went for with our predictions from there. So you're 30-18. I'm 26-22. So we had the exact same record at the major, coincidentally. But we have 10 matches, I believe, this weekend. They start on March 11th, which is Friday. These are online qualifying matches, really seeding matches. We have 3 matches on Friday: New York versus London, Seattle versus Boston, and Florida versus LAG. We don't really need to spend too much time on these because we've talked about all of these teams so far this podcast, and we will talk plenty about these specific matches next week on the pod. So New York versus London, who do you got?
I'm going to go with New York here. Very controversial, in my opinion, but um, I think, kind of like I was mentioning when we talked about New York almost like an hour ago at this point.
Yeah.
Um, if they're going to turn things around, it has to start here right away. So, fully expecting London to win this one, but um, I guess I wouldn't be super surprised if New York is able to fix things and come out and get a win right away, but it would be surprising still.
Yeah, I'm picking London. I think they're probably the third best team in the league, maybe the fourth best team.
Yeah.
And New York might be the worst team in the league at the moment with how they played. So I'm going to go with London. The next match of the day, Seattle versus Boston. The Surge coming off of an 0-2 performance at the major on a 4-match losing streak. And Boston having a pretty good run at the major before getting eliminated. I'm going to go with Boston. I mean, I don't have any confidence in Seattle at the moment. I didn't think I would pick the Surge or pick the Breach over the Surge a few weeks ago because, I mean, I really wasn't picking the Breach at all. And Seattle looked to be one of the best teams. But at the moment, the Surge are just kind of slumping, and I don't see them getting out of it immediately. So who do you got?
Yeah, I think I agree with you that because of the slump, I'm kind of leaning towards Boston, but I'm gonna pick Seattle. Um, Kind of similar train of thought to New York in the sense that I would probably say Boston is favored heading into this matchup just based on
Yeah.
recent performances. But if Seattle's going to turn things around, they got to start right here. And I think this is a good draw for them. I don't think, Boston had a good performance at the major, and they're not performing as poorly as, Paris or Legion or Paris or New York, like, teams towards the bottom of the standings. So, not taking anything away from Boston when I say this, but like it's not like Seattle's kicking off these stage 2 matches by playing OpTic or FaZe, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Boston should be a beatable team if Seattle is playing the way they played earlier in the season. And I think if they're going to turn things around, it has to start here. So I'm just going to go with them.
Last match of Friday, Florida versus LAG. Neither of these teams performed well at the major. A lot to work on. I'm gonna go with Florida reluctantly because like I think there are a lot of things that they can work on, but I think the base is a little stronger than LAG's base at the moment. But it's not a very confident pick, and I could definitely see LAG winning. Who do you have in this series?
Yeah, this is one I have no idea who's going to win. Literally, most recently, just saw Florida lose a series where Big Wake drops 119 kills. So,
Yeah.
um, I don't know what we're going to get from either of these teams. I'm going to go with LAG. Um, but this is one I actually think LAG's like been playing from Texas, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so it might not be, we've talked about like potential online cross continental issues with like Florida playing against like the Thieves or something like that. So probably ping might not be as big of an issue here for an online match, but I really don't know who I expect to win this one. I could see it going either way, but I'll go with LAG.
We have Saturday, March 12th. We have 4 matches on that day. LAG, they start that day's matches against Paris. I'm going to go with LAG. I'm not buying into this Paris hype just yet. Maybe you are, but I'm definitely not. Who do you have here?
I'm going LAG too.
Okay.
But this is also, I feel like this is a trap game in the sense that if LAG comes out flat against Florida, they could be tilted. Paris could take advantage of that, and Paris could start a, stage set of qualifier matches, whatever you want to say. They could start it undefeated, 1-0. That'd be a pretty big start for Paris. So, um, I don't know. I guess I could see this going either way again, but I'm leaning LAG. Um, yeah.
LAT versus London is the next match. This is a cross country online match, which is going to make it pretty interesting. I'll go with LAT. I think this is a really interesting match because these are, I think, what we both consider to be the third and fourth best teams in the league, and they both showed quite a bit of potential this past weekend. So I'm just going to go with LAT. I just have a better gut feeling about them.
Yeah, I think um, this is going to be a good series because both of these teams excel in hardpoint. So whoever's able to win those hard points, I feel like would obviously have the edge because Surge could be like a coin flip for either of them. But I'm expecting like bloody down to the wire hard point matches between both of these teams here. But I will pick the Thieves as well.
Last 2 matches of Saturday, I think we'll agree on both. Minnesota versus Toronto. I'm going to go with Toronto. I don't have a lot of confidence in the Rocker at the moment. And the Ultra, even with their hardpoint problems, I think that they probably are the better team here. And Atlanta versus Seattle, there's no shot that I'm picking Seattle in this. If I'm not picking them against Boston, I'm definitely not picking them against Atlanta. So I'm going to go with FaZe.
Yeah, I don't think we got to talk about Atlanta Seattle much.
Yeah.
It is kind of interesting. We'll see Sid play against his quote unquote former team that he was a sub for.
Yeah.
And they did. They played in the kickoff classic, right? That's what Seattle beat them, even though they didn't
Yeah,
have
that
Nikki
was
D.
the only Atlanta
Yeah,
match.
yeah. So, um, but obviously different Seattle playing now. I'm still gonna pick FaZe there. Um, but I am interested in this Toronto Minnesota match because kind of as we've touched on multiple times now throughout this episode, neither team has performed exceptionally well in hardpoint or the respawns this year. So I feel like this is a good matchup for Toronto. Similar to how I'm saying, like if Seattle wants to bounce back, this is one where if Toronto's looking to bounce back in the respawns, they got a good matchup here in the sense that Minnesota isn't like a super strong respawn team. Whereas if Toronto was playing like London or the Thieves right here, a team that's like really good in hardpoint, that would be a tough draw, and it would be hard to gauge if they're like improving in hardpoint. This should be a good test to see where Toronto's hardpoint is at, and I just think Toronto is a better search team right now. And search is like that one mode you look at Minnesota to take advantage of. So if I'm envisioning Toronto winning the searches, I can't pick Minnesota to win, so I'll go with Toronto here too.
And we have 3 matches on Sunday. The first 2 matches feature the bottom 4 teams from the previous major, which was or from the previous like qualifying matches, which I thought was interesting. So you have Paris and Minnesota against each other, and New York versus Florida against each other. I'm gonna go with Minnesota over Paris. Like I said, I'm not buying into Paris right now. Their stocks are they're penny stocks at the moment, and I might buy them at any given moment, but that moment is not right now. And New York and Florida, I have to pick Florida. Like I can't pick New York until they prove it. So I'll go with the Mutineers.
Yeah, I'm matching you on both of those picks there. Um, I guess it depends on what we see in the Paris LAG game. If Paris just looks super strong in that one, I could see a world where they beat Minnesota, but I'm going to go with Minnesota there as well. And then Florida, New York, I did pick New York to beat London, but I've been picking London to lose every series this year. So I guess that's not too big of a surprise. And in this case, I'll go with Florida just because I'm not going to pick New York to get 2 wins just quite yet.
To cap off the week, we have the HBR Classic OpTic versus LAT. I mean, I have to pick OpTic here. They're coming off
Yep.
of 2 wins over FaZe. what is that, eight map wins over Atlanta, which is an amazing feat, and other victories over some of the better teams in the league. But we didn't get to see this match at the major, and I really want to see this match at a major with the fans and everything. But we'll take it online, I guess. But yeah, I'm gonna go with OpTic.
Yep, I'm going OpTic too. Excited for this matchup. Should be a good one. We did see OpTic play Gavutu against FaZe twice, and we've talked about that, multiple times now in this podcast. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Gavutu hardpoint in this showdown, which would be an exciting one to watch, in my opinion. But I just think no matter what, this is going to be a super exciting series. But I got to go with OpTic. Just won the major, so tough draw for Thieves. I believe I'm pretty sure they started out last online set against FaZe, and they lost that, and then they went 4-1. So it could be a similar situation here. I don't know Thieves' other opponents, but two back-to-back tough first match draws for the Thieves in these online stages.
Yeah, this is kind of how it works, and some teams have to get the short end of the stick at some point with these predetermined, matchups and everything. But yeah, it should be a really interesting week of Call of Duty League action. We'll be back next week, which is March 15th, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. Make sure to follow the podcast feed or subscribe to it. We're on Spotify, which was down today, which was a huge bummer for me. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, etc. I believe that you can leave us a rating on Spotify in addition to Apple Podcasts, so 5 stars on all the podcast platforms, please. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitch. Like I said, twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast, where we stream the podcast live. Follow us on Twitter. He is at jbink with 2 Ks. I'm at Preston Byers, and the podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. I think that about does it. Check out .esports.com, I guess. And yeah, Bink, take it away.
Yep. Thank you guys for tuning in. A longer episode than we've been trying to do recently, but obviously had a lot to talk about. Hope you guys, for those of you that watched the major, I hope you guys enjoyed it, because in my eyes, Vanguard has been super heavily criticized as a game, and I'm not saying it's the best Call of Duty ever, and it has plenty of things that need to be improved and plenty of issues, but I felt like the matches have been super entertaining so far, and I felt like the matches this weekend were very entertaining as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed them as much as I did. If this is our first time doing like a full tournament recap in a while, since champs last year, obviously. So if you guys have any feedback for us on how we broke things down and stuff for the whole tournament, you can let us know in the comments or on Twitter, however you want to do that. We're always open to criticism, or constructive criticism, I should say. But yeah, thank you guys, and as always, remember to send the chow.